Hello, welcome back to this channel called Biblical Validity, where we take a look at how science and historical scholarship and logic all point to how the Bible is actually true, is actually valid. So today, this is maybe one of my most important videos, and I'll try to stay on point, not ramble too much, keep it as short as I can because it's your time is valuable also. So I'll get right to it. Except I'm happy to be in the parking lot down in St. Petersburg near the St. Pete Chess Club with the big banyan tree in my background. Uh, Actually, I'm up in my cabin in a different state. I did grow up in Florida. I played a lot of chess when I was young, and I used to play down at the St. Pete Chess Club about 50 years ago. And I think 2 years ago, visiting down there, I went down there to see what it looked like. And I forgot about this big banyan tree. It's humongous, and I think they're native to India. And you can kind of see, I'll get out of the way. It has a lot of a lot of little tree trunks going down, rooting into the ground. And so I imagine they live near water. I don't know. I don't know much about banyan trees, but they're kind of rare in the United States. And this is a beautiful, beautiful one. It's very big. Okay, how mainstream science is getting important things wrong. All right. So today I'm going to focus a lot on, you might say, the logic of how mainstream science approaches their theories. And I don't. Uh, well, let's just get into it. Okay. Um, so I say whether we like it or not, there are two major forms of science. Well, what are they? Um, well, one is based in an ability to confirm theories through repeatable observations and experimentation. And this is called operational science. And you might think, well, isn't that all science? You see, people tend to believe that science gets it right, that science proves, for example, that the creation account in Genesis is all wrong. God could not have created all this in 6 days, in 6,000 years, because all the evidence out there shows to the contrary. Science proves the Bible is wrong. Science proves that there are no supernatural miracles and things like that. You know, people believe a lot of this, and so. But I'm not here to bash operational science. It's fantastic. And but just briefly, here's the other form of science. The other is speculation about the unobserved past, pieced together from current evidence and using known properties of science. And this is sometimes called historical science. All right, so this is where science tries to figure out what happened in the past. And even though they couldn't be there to observe it, may not be able to repeat any experiments to sort of demonstrate that, oh, that's what really happened. And so and there's no way to avoid historical science if you're going to try to figure out why is the universe like it is, why is Earth like it is, why is the crust of the Earth like it is. Uh, we haven't been there to physically observe all those processes going back in time. So all we can do is theorize and come up with our best theories. Anyway, there's a way to test those theories, and that's one of the things I'm going to get into in this video. Okay, so operational, or sometimes I call experimentally based science, is really wonderful. This type of science employs the scientific method that you learned about in school. And that's theories are developed from observations and are tested through experimentation. Sometimes further refinement to a theory is necessary based on results. Oh yeah, and this is really rather typical. And a famous example of this is in the 1600s, Sir Isaac Newton came up with his theories of gravity and came up with some calculations that work very, very well in our world. And he seemed to have gravity down. And then in 1905, um, uh, Albert Einstein showed us that not so fast. This needs some tweaking. These theories need some tweaking. And it's Newtonian mechanics, they call it, has been supplanted by Einstein's relativity theories. Okay, and they work better. These theories can be verified pretty well through experimentation. So that's still observational science in that respect. So, but that's how science can go sometimes. Sometimes we just continue to refine what we know about the world. All right. And there's no reason for Christians to oppose operational science. There's also no reason to oppose data or evidence gathered through sound methods of observation. So um, I think it's, well, let me say this. The Bible kind of talks about this a little bit. I think it does. Um, in beginning of Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Okay. And so states that God's responsible for all that wonderfulness out there. It's the glory of God. And why not try to figure out how that works? And then from Proverbs 25, verse 2, it is the glory of God to conceal a matter, to search out a matter is the glory of kings. And I'm not sure quite what kings means in this context. I'm sure a theologian would know about this. Maybe it was a translation thing between the ancient Hebrew and English. I don't know. But anyway, glory of God to conceal a matter, to search out a matter is the glory of kings. And that's what science is trying to do. Well, why? What is God's secrets? That's how I look at it, at least. But Christians who embrace the Bible as revealed truth are often accused of being anti-science. All right. No, we have no reason to be anti-science. It's not so. We just don't accept the mainstream's unscientific, man-made religious belief that Genesis got it wrong. All right. So I use the term mainstream science in this video a lot, and that I mean by the prevailing consensus among professional scientists, and actually, truth be told, probably the majority of the world, that the version of mainstream science is true. Okay. Now, if you pin down a scientist, will say, well, a lot of this are theories that haven't been proven yet. But by and large, most of the public believes that the Big Bang, the ancient universe, evolution, stuff like that, life coming from some puddle of inorganic chemicals, non-life chemicals, all that stuff has been proven by science. No, it hasn't. That's not. And partly that's actually that's a lot of what this website's about, is looking at the evidence of science to show that really, in effect, the evidence is pointing toward God more and more as we get into the evidence of science. It is pointing toward the Bible is a lot better explanation for what happened than the man-made theories of the mainstream scientists. So, okay, so sadly, too many people, including many Christians, accept the claims of mainstream science as proven fact. Yeah, and it's not proven fact. They're theories. Evolution is a theory. The Big Bang is a theory. All that stuff that happened in the deep time past. They're theories, and it is largely impossible to prove these theories because we can't go back in time to watch what happened. We can't create experiments. We can't create a Big Bang in a lab, for example, and we can't get life to start on its own in the lab. We can't observe real evolution, not adaptation, but actual evolution has never been observed. Yeah, they're theories, but they've been writing this for going on 200 years, I would say. The mainstream science and public buys into it for the most part, even Christians. So the problems with the claims of historical science regarding the origin of the universe, the origin of life, Darwinian evolution, and some other factors are constructed on a foundation of unproven speculation. So that's kind of what I've been saying here. Unproven speculation. And so we should be kind of suspicious of it. Is this stuff really true? Now, those in the Judeo-Christian faith, Jews and Christians, who accept the Genesis account of a six-day creation about 6,000 years ago, accept this as a religious belief, and their worldview is relevant to the creation of the universe. But that's not science; it's faith. Okay. Let's call these people young Earth creationists. I'm a young Earth creationist. I believe in the literal account of Genesis. And when you use the word literal in terms of the Bible, sometimes the Bible does metaphors. And so I'm not sure if there's a better word. But I do think the Bible is true. Many people do. And particularly in Genesis, those people, you could say they're young earth creationists. Okay, so that's a term that's out there. Now, on the other hand, mainstream science over more than 2 centuries has sought to replace God as the cause of creation and life with a false God, nature. And I hear I like listening to these scientists, the mainstream scientists, very brilliant, bright people, very smart people, and you can tell a lot of them have a great reverence for nature. They love the universe. They're stoked by trying to figure out how's this all working, okay? And they're trying to figure out how stuff works, and they really revere nature. The problem is they they're creating a false god of nature. They should be really thinking about who created nature. You know, who is the real God that created nature? And so that's how some people get sidetracked, I think. Okay, now to be fair, from a Christian perspective, rejecting the biblical account of creation is not a salvation issue. Okay, so many Christians do reject the Genesis account, and roughly half of professional scientists who believe the mainstream scientific version also believe in a God of some sort, or even Christians. So there's a danger when I do a video like this that I'm going to overgeneralize, one side or the other. And no, it's not that simple. I'm not saying all scientists are atheists. They're not. About half of them believe in some kind of God, and quite a few are Christians. And but not all, not all Christians believe are young Earth creationists. Probably at least half or more go along with the science. They don't believe that Genesis really happened the way it said. Okay, so why is all this important? All right, why I get worked up in a video about this? Okay, so if the Bible is God's inspired word, then rejecting any of it ultimately undermines the faith in God's power to get His message to us. And I'm sure others can be more articulate about this than me, but I think it's important. Consider also that Jesus vouched for the validity of the Bible in numerous ways. And this is what got me when I finally realized Jesus was God in human form walking the earth, so we got to know Him. He had the power to make sure that His message of His ministry got to all of us, including in modern times. And Jesus also many times referenced events in the Old Testament, or even said that all those scriptures are true and valid. So I think if you believe Jesus is his God who walked the earth in our form and died for our sins and the whole Christian thing, then you better take it seriously. You got to take his words seriously. Okay, now you might say that historical science is scientific speculation about what happened in the earth in the past based upon observations in the present and applications of what we know about natural laws. Okay, and to some degree, historical science is unavoidable, but it has its weaknesses. So historical science is not automatically bad. All right, sometimes it's what else can you say? And certainly, young Earth creationist scientists, and there are some of those out there. There are scientists who do believe in the Bible, all of it, including the Genesis account. Sometimes they're doing historical science also, and so I think you have to be rather intellectually honest about it. That well, we're working on theories here. Okay, so some examples. Forensic science is partly a historical science. Forensic science, it's interesting. Years ago, I lived near Knoxville, Tennessee, and the University of Tennessee has this small field next to it, fenced off, where they'll deposit a few dead bodies and just keep track of how they rot. And it's kind of grisly, kind of morbid thinking, but it's for forensic science, and so that forensic scientists can, when examining evidence of a crime scene or someone who died, they can begin to estimate how long ago did that event happen. That's very important. And so they are collecting evidence in order to bolster their historical science of forensics. So yeah, you can mix observational evidence and experimentation in with historical science in some cases. That helps it a lot. Archaeology is a historical science. Think about these archaeologists sifting through the ruins of an ancient city and looking at clay pots, broken clay shards, and stuff like that. They're trying to figure out how long ago was this here, what caused it to decline, and what can they figure out? What can the archaeologists figure out about that city? So that's a historical science, but they also have some observational science in that, which helps them, come up with their dating methods. So both of these and others are really useful branches of science. So okay, and I want to thank a website called Spirit and Truth. I just ran into stfi.org. Gave examples in articulating, for examples in articulating operational historical science. So I want to give them some credit here for helping me talk about this. Okay, some of the sciences rightfully seek to understand how natural processes have shaped our world. While they correctly base their theories on observational data and known science laws, they invite problems by building their theories on a foundation of historical speculations, which can never be confirmed by observation or experimentation. And so that's a big paragraph there, and it's and this video purpose of this video is to point out the mistakes mainstream science has been making for quite a long time and still do to today. So we'll get to all that here. Logic, however, does provide a way to examine the evidence for competing theories. And some more on this later. For example, is the Earth 4.5 billion years old, or is the Earth 6,000 years old? No one's really arguing for in between or any other different numbers. It's either very ancient, billions of years old, or it's pretty recent, 6,000 years old, according to the biblical account. We can weigh that evidence, okay? We really can, and see how it's going for both sides. So I'm going to elaborate on this later on in this video. All right, so intentionally or not, what I call mainstream science gradually undermined the Bible, starting at least as early as the late 1700s. Now, someday I'll probably do a lot more digging and produce a video just on this whole evolution, you might say, of mainstream science and how all that happened. But so I'll just kind of give a kind of short bird's eye view here, what went on. So before that, and for a while afterwards, some of the greatest scientists, Johannes Kepler, Galileo Galilei, both great astronomers, Isaac Newton, and James Clerk Maxwell. Maxwell, around 1860s, I think, he figured out that electricity and magnetism were linked together, and one is a form of the other. Kind of like Einstein, when he came up with E equals mc squared, he determined that matter and energy are intricately linked through this equation. And so Maxwell did some other things. He also, by the way, created the first color photograph in 1860. Little fun fact there. But he believed in the Genesis account too. So these great minds did that. Now, I really like John Lennox, Dr. John Lennox. He's an Oxford mathematician. He's retired from Oxford. As he puts it, and he's an Irishman. He's got a great accent. You can find him all over over YouTube, by the way. I always recommend listen to John Lennox. He's got a lot of good stuff to say. So as John Lennox put it, they recognize that, I'm talking about these old great scientists, they recognize that the laws of science imply that there's a lawgiver, and they're interested in how God did it. Okay, and I say, well, think about Proverbs that I mentioned above there, kind of related to that. They're seeking out how did God do this? Okay. All right. Now it was kind of a combination of philosophers, the Enlightenment, which I'm not sure exactly what that means, era, philosophers, scientists, theologians, all kind of sort of conspired together to change things. So I say here is a geologist who made the first great strides toward replacing God in science. So a Scotsman, James Hutton, lived in the 1700s. He is revered as the father of modern geology. Oh, yeah, they lionize these guys. His theory was that the world's very ancient history can be inferred from evidence found in present-day rocks. Okay, so he furthermore, Hutton argued that the Earth undergoes gradual transformation over very long periods. Now, how did he come to that conclusion? Well, quite reasonably, this is what he observed. He looks out every day on the fields, and it's not changing much. Okay, and so he just decided, well, it's the Earth gradually transforms itself, and that's what he came up with. So there was no Noah's flood, which is a catastrophic flood, no catastrophic flood, according to these people. And Earth was far older than depicted in Genesis. And so, because it needed this sort of worldview of theirs, where the Earth is undergoing gradual transformation, needed a lot of time for that to happen. Millions of years, now billions of years. We're up to 4.5 billion years. And I think when I get to that part in my this whole website video series on how old is the solar system, and how do they figure out how old the solar system is? And no one was there to see it start, except God. And so, anyway, let's move on. So, in time, Hutton's theories became known as uniformitarianism. And that's a belief that the geology we observe is a result of gradual and continuing natural processes over a very long time periods. Yeah. Let me throw out a fun fact for you. We humans never saw the other side of the moon until I think the Russians took a few photos of it in 1959 when they sent a satellite around it. And then eventually some Americans orbited the moon and got to see it. 18 Americans got to orbit the moon. And the back side of the moon looks a lot different than the front side of the moon. It looks like the geologic processes that happen on the side that we face of the moon is a lot different from that on the back side. And it's almost as if there was a wave of stuff that came at the moon that passed very close or even struck Earth and struck the moon on the side that always faces us. And yes, there are craters on the other side of the moon, but there are a lot different types of craters. So that's not gradual change. It sounds like that was a pretty sudden thing. And another fun fact, maybe this has something to do with Noah's flood. All right, I know it sounds crazy, but you have to hear me out on a later video. And no, we can't prove that, but it's an interesting theory. Okay. All right, so thus the unproven belief that nature creates and requires deep amounts of time became the bedrock of faith in mainstream science. So these scientists rejected the Genesis account of creation. I'm not saying that all of them rejected God, but they think, well, the Bible's not always true. All right, because we know better. We scientists know better than whoever wrote the Bible. All right. Now, there was another Scotsman, Charles Lyell, lived well into the 1800s. He published his Principles in Geology back in the 1830s. And he took up where Hutton and his followers left off. And he famously declared that the present is the key to the past. That was his motto. The present, what we see now, is the key to what happened in the past. Okay. Yep. So, well, that seemed to hit home for a lot of people. Lyell was also a great friend of Charles Darwin and influenced Darwin's theories and natural selection driving evolution. So they were great friends there. So Darwin needed long periods of time for evolution to happen also. Okay, Darwin. So Darwin also required long periods of time to support his theories of natural evolution. Thus, he too was instrumental in influencing science to replace God with man-made theories. And actually, these men of science were influenced by earlier philosophers such as David Hume, who declared that all human knowledge derives solely from experience. Experience and reasoning, all human knowledge comes from that. And so Hume, and no doubt a lot of philosophers influenced by him, just thought, well, we humans can figure it all out. All right, we can do it by experience. We can do it by our thought and reasoning. We can figure everything out. And so he was influential. Now, Hume was from the 1700s, I believe. Okay, so and then here come the liberal theologians. They also jumped into this campaign against the biblical account, beginning in the 1700s, by giving priority to modern knowledge, science, and ethics, emphasizing human reasoning and experience over biblical authority. Ah, so they decided they know more than the Bible. Okay, and well, you can do that. I mean, we have free will to do that, and so, but this was an influencing factor, I'm sure, on mainstream science also. The So the liberal theologians embraced the theories of Darwin and Lyell and others and became somewhat influential in many Protestant churches by the late 1800s. And I think I read also in Catholicism soon thereafter. So I'm not sure how big of an influence they were. I haven't really delved into that. I don't know that history very well at all. But it's still there today. There are denominations who pretty much stay away from the beginning of Genesis. They don't really want to talk about it because they don't believe it. Okay, and so anyway, uh, perhaps the Bible anticipated these kinds of issues. So here's one from Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 6. I know you can read this, but I'll read it to you. Also, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. And oh boy, I can vouch for this for myself from personal experience because most of my life, I leaned on my own understanding. All right, it's a mistake. It's a mistake. Once you submit to God, He will teach you. That's my claim from my life. Okay, believe it or not, and I know God handles everybody in different ways. It's a one-on-one thing. But it's an amazing proverb and something I think we should take seriously. Okay, so now let's fast forward today. The tenets, the beliefs of mainstream science hold that the universe is at least 13.8 billion years old. The universe created itself, with all the laws of science and constant numbers in nature in place to allow for life. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Life began from non-life. How's that? How does life create? How does non-life create life? That's quite a leap, isn't it? The intricate engineering found in life far exceeds anything humans have been able to create, and yet emerged by purely random processes over millions of years. And there's more. I can go on and on. So these are sort of the pillars of belief of mainstream science. I'm not saying every mainstream science believes all of this. Um, and yeah, there's varieties on this. They're trying to get away from the universe creating itself. How did matter and energy just appear out of nowhere? Yeah, good question. That violates the first law of thermodynamics. And but the universe cannot really be infinitely old because that would violate the second law of thermodynamics. Okay, we wouldn't be here if the universe was eternal. So they come up with some competing theories. Well, maybe there's multiple universes, maybe even infinitely many universes. Maybe they pop up all the time at random. They still not explain where does this matter and energy come from. So there's a lot of problems with these, with this that they're having. Age of the Earth. Oh, wow. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Anyway, this is pretty much the foundations of beliefs. So, kind of repeating myself, one of the main missions of this channel is to give evidence counter to the godless, faith-based claims of mainstream science, and to show that scientific evidence actually points to our Creator God. Okay, so yes, science points to God. And by the way, this is a fairly, in my mind, a fairly recent thing. Because growing up as a kid, um, if you're going to be a Christian, you had to pretty much do it by blind faith. But now, with such great technology coming on board, great scientific discoveries, um, we're finding a lot more evidence that supports that there has to be a God, and God created all this, and on and on. So that's really one of the main things about this channel, and I'm trying to explore out there. And by the way, this information is all out there. It's I'm hardly the first guy to ever talk about any of this, and I always encourage you to delve deeper. Listen to real experts in scientific fields. I'm a mathematician. I'm not I'm not a credentialed scientist in the scientific sense. Um, and so, and no one's an expert in all fields of science. So, but you can find experts out there who will give you this evidence, and it's readily available. So, I'm hardly the only one that knows any of this stuff, not by a long shot. Okay. Um, so yeah, I said all this. I said, sorry, I can't do all this in one video. Yeah, it's going to take a lot of videos. So, and while I'm at it, the YouTube thing is to be sure, if you like these videos, be sure to subscribe and hit the like button, hit the notification bell, share it with anybody you think might be interested. Put some comments in there. Welcome all that. And the reason people bug you about that on YouTube videos is because this is what gets the attention of Google's algorithms, which leads it to publish this, get this out to more people. More people get exposed to these videos. It helps grow the channel that way. So, all right, I got that out of the way. Okay. So, what are the biggest mistakes committed by mainstream science? Okay, so if science is to be a pursuit of truth, what mistakes are mainstream scientists making that blocks this truth? And I've come up with five points on this I'm going to go over. So now bear in mind, these are opinions. These opinions are just generalizations. They do not fairly apply to all scientists embracing the mainstream beliefs. So now you can uh, sometimes something like this can be kind of caricatured as oh, he's accusing everybody of this. No, I know it's people vary greatly in their opinions and beliefs, but you can almost say mainstream science, as I'm depicting it, shows up a lot in the education of scientists and in textbooks, how people teach science, and lots of other things. All right, so what are the biggest mistakes? And I've got five of them I've come up with here. Scientists tend to thrive in a bubble, mostly only talking to those within their specific discipline. Okay, this is quite natural. If you work in a large research university, say you're in the physics department, you're going to talk to physicists most of the time. If you work in biology, you're not going to talk to physicists. You won't talk to engineers. You'll talk to biologists. So they tend to live in their own bubble. And by doing so, they risk missing evidence that runs counter to their theories. All right. I want to give you an example of this. One of the greatest physicists of our day, who's still alive, he's pretty old. I won't mention his name, but I love listening to him. He's an idea factory, and but he is I believe he's an acknowledged atheist, and he's also a deterministic, which means he does not believe in free will. He believes that all our decisions and all our actions are caused by physical processes. And now that doesn't make him a bad guy. He seems to be a pretty nice fella. And so lately he's been interested in what's the nature of consciousness. And that's a big question. I'm not sure anybody understands exactly what consciousness is. And does that point to a mind that we all have that is somehow outside of our brain matter? All right. Do we have a mind, a consciousness that exists outside our brain matter? Well, if your whole world you're myopically focused on physics, it's not possible because everything can be explained by physics. All right. So, and he comes up with these interesting theories about, well, we think maybe be at the end of the synapses and the neurons, and there's quantum fluctuations going on, and there's tubules and things, and I can't explain him what he's getting at, but because it's been a while since I listened to him. Kind of interesting thoughts, but he's missing a lot. He's missing a lot. So what is he missing? Well, it's been known since a book was published in 1951 by a big pioneer in the field of neurosurgery. His name was Wilder Penfeld, and he had done 1,100 surgeries over a career, trying to pinpoint the causes of epilepsy. That's how he was motivated, and he found that you can operate on a person's brain with their skull open and they're wide awake and can talk to you, because we don't have those kind of nerve endings up there that's going to feel pain. So just give a local anesthetic, open up the brain, and he developed a little probe which had a little bit of electricity in it. He could touch parts of the brain, and and ask questions and talk to the patient while they're doing the surgery. So over probably a couple of decades, 1,100 surgeries, maybe 8 hours at a time, twice a minute. He would probe the brain. This you can work it out. This comes out to over 1 million scientific trials, you might say, statistical trials. And he only had 4 reactions when he probed the brain. He learned he could cause a limb to move. You can maybe make your arm rise by probing a particular part of the brain. He could stimulate memories, certain memories. He could stimulate an emotional response. People get very intense emotions if he hit the right spots. And I forgot the other one. I think might have something to do with some kinds of perceptions. I'm not sure what that was. I don't remember it that well. But one thing he never, ever, not once, over 1 million trials, ever saw was that probing the brain ever ever led to any increase in abstract thought. Nothing ever touched abstract thought, and not once. So where is abstract thought in the brain matter? And well, we don't know where it is yet. Maybe it's not there. Okay, maybe it's in the mind. All right. So that's maybe this physicist ought to think about looking at that. He also was able to do experiments where he pretty much showed that people have free will, and it's very interesting. I think I will talk about that in greater detail in another video. Okay, and there's another one. Near-death experiences. These things are real. People, particularly with the technology we have, people do die, or we are able to medically bring them back if we act quick enough. And but people have been studying near-death experiences since 1892, and the French started studying those. And over the years, there've been databases, a lot of interviews, a lot of information collected, a lot of statistics gathered, and there's been scientifically peer-reviewed journal articles produced that prove that even people who are brain dead and heart dead, I mean, they're dead, when they were brought back to life, had witnessed an event that happened outside of their possible view, laying there on the table. Maybe it was outside the hospital. Maybe they witnessed an accident out there during the time they were dead in any sense that we can identify it, and verified that there is a consciousness going on after death. And now it's all over the place. Some people, come back from death and don't remember anything. Some just remember hovering around the room while people worked on them. But there are people, quite a few, who went down that tunnel of light, we'll say, and met Jesus. Met Jesus. Got to see a little bit of heaven. There's been a handful of people who actually were pulled down into hell and had a couple minutes down in hell. Very horrific experience, beyond anything we can really imagine. Terrible experience. And And there's evidence from those that when those people, some people cried out for Jesus, and Jesus came down and pulled them out of hell, and then they came back to life. And boy, those experiences really change your life in serious ways. So there's enough of this recorded that you got to take it seriously. And so where are you going to find consciousness? Is it inside the brain matter? Maybe we have a mind that is not, strictly speaking, entirely physical, naturalistic, or materialistic. So our physicist friend, going back to my main point, he's missing evidence that runs counter to his theories. He thinks his theory is that consciousness only happens somewhere in the brain matter. All right. Some other quick examples. What gets a lot of press and speculation is the Big Bang theories, and they've determined by observation it looks like the universe is at least 13.8 billion years old, and young Earth creationists do not argue with the perception that the evidence tends to show that. So how in the world do you counter that? And that's probably their best argument, by the way. But there are some very interesting ideas floating around. It's even possible. It's not impossible that when we focus our telescopes at the edge of the known visible universe, 13.8 billion light years away, that we're actually watching what's going on in real time. Okay, and how can that be? Well, we learn about how they figured out the speed of light. It's always a two-way measurement. There is impossible to measure light speed going in a single direction. And this is called Einstein's synchronization problem. Einstein worried about this. I can't prove that the speed of light is the same in both directions. And those scientists, 100 years ago, argued about this stuff and wondered how do we prove these one-way speed of light? So there's all kinds of neat stuff out there. I don't know when if ever, we'll get to the bottom of that issue. But I think it's quite interesting. But what about those astronomers and physicists who are thinking about the distant universe and how all that came about? And they claim it happened 13.8 billion years ago. Well, here's the point. If they get out of that bubble and talk to the people studying the planets in our solar system, what's going on in the planets, you look at the magnetic fields, the rate at which heat dissipates from planets, geologic activity, the rings around planets, and also look at Earth. There's so much evidence that the solar system cannot be very old. It'd be measured in thousands of years, maybe 6,000 years old. And here's a good example: the what's called the Oort cloud. Now, this is accepted as a tenet of faith in the mainstream community. In 1950, I think he was from the Netherlands, Jan Oort. Jan Oort, great astronomer, by the way. He had a lot of accomplishments. Probably won the Nobel Prize for something. Got to think about comets. How can we see comets? Okay, when you think about comets, it's an ice ball that orbits the sun. Every time it goes near the sun, some of that ice burns off or evaporates and creates a little cloud, and that it forms a comet's tail. Well, after and the rough estimate is that after maybe 1,000 trips around the sun, there's not going to be anything left of that comet. It's just going to break up. There's nothing left to evaporate. So comets have a limited lifetime. The shortest comet is called Encke. It goes around the sun every 3.3 years. Okay, so after 3,300 years, you wouldn't expect it's going to be around. They have some comets that last 10s or 20 or 30,000 years, and but multiply that by 1,000, and you're not into billions of years. So we should not see comets. So Oort said, well, I think maybe what happened is that there must be a cloud, a big cloud way outside, not outside the solar system, but way past Pluto, we'll say, of these icy ice ball objects. And there's billions of them, and once in a while something passes nearby and kind of gravitationally kicks them out out of their position there, and they end up going into orbit around the sun. And that's how the comets get replenished from this cloud. This became known as the Oort cloud. And it's accepted as fact. If you listen to people talk about astronomy, they if you pin them down, they say, well, it's an unproven theory because no one has ever observed the Oort cloud. We can't see it. We can't find it yet. I'm not saying it's not out there. Yeah, maybe it is out there, but so far it's a theory. It's an unproven theory, and it filled in a gap of knowledge, because otherwise, how come we still see comets if our Earth is 4.5 billion years old? You would think all the comets would have disappeared a long time ago. Let me give you one other example here. I'm kind of whetting the appetite because I'm going to cover all this and much more in these videos in due course. And one of my favorites ideas that cells in living organisms contain machinery far more intricate and complicated than anything humans have been able to invent. The human cells have motors in them, and these motors can spin at up to 10,000 RPM. They are almost entirely perfectly, how should I say, they don't wear out. Okay, I guess maybe they would, but eventually, but not like human motors, which have to be oiled and eventually just wear out and something, falls apart. These things last and last and last, and on that scale, we can't begin to build these things. And these motors are used to transport various molecules to form the various proteins and hormones and things that the cells need to do. They can run the little cilia on the outside to help it guide a cell around. They run on either electricity or chemical energy. I think there's two different kinds. So you get into this, and you see all this stuff, and thinking, how in the world did this come from? And so if you ask an engineer, they say, well, what do you think about this? An engineer would say, it's designed. Nature could not have formed this through random processes, which is what the mainstream science believes, that all this came about through random mutations. And an engineer would look at it and say, oh, you guys are crazy. That's designed that way. It would be like going to a car junkyard and coming back in a couple million years and expecting to find a brand new looking car, maybe a 1958 Edsel or something. Okay, suddenly just assembled itself through random processes of the weather and things going on Earth. Okay, it's not going to happen. And so, and there are also things in the cells which had to have appeared at the same time, because we'll say the DNA was necessary to make this molecule, but this molecule was necessary to allow the DNA to replicate. I think it's called isotopomorphism. Anyway, I'll do a video on it someday. Really great things going on. So the biologists who think all this stuff is random chance and selection, and they're not talking to geneticists, they're not learning about second law of thermodynamics from the physicists, and not talking to engineers. They live in their bubbles, okay, protecting their theories. All right, that was kind of a lengthy one on that topic. I think I'll go faster. I got 4 more of these. Okay. So number 2, many, perhaps most colleges and universities enforce discipline to the prevailing worldview of the scientific establishment. It is not always possible for a young Earth creationist to get a job or to even earn an advanced degree at many institutions. All right, so this discourages open challenges of the mainstream ideology posed by a different interpretation of evidence. All right, so I won't say this is true at every college and university, because we do have young Earth creationists getting doctorates, earning doctorates, and some of them do teach in regular universities. They do have those kinds of jobs. I think some of them might tell you that, well, I had to keep my views quiet in order to not have any problems with this. But yeah, there are certainly, I hear anecdotally that there's certainly, it does happen out there. Those people can be discriminated against because the department doesn't believe in miracles, for example, doesn't believe in any supernatural miracles, so they don't want to mess with anybody who actually believes in that stuff. So why would we have them waste our time. And so they're not permitted to work there, or might not even be permitted to go for a doctorate. So, but like I say, this is it really creates a one-sided view of science, which is the mainstream view, because it doesn't get challenged. Number 3, mainstream professional journals, which are professional peer-reviewed publications, tend to reject out of hand any consideration of evidence challenging some of the established beliefs of the mainstream. Yeah, they're just no, we don't believe that stuff. Like, if you had a lot of evidence that a major catastrophic flood event happened somewhere in the past 4 or 5,000 years, I don't think you'd find a regular mainstream journal that would even think about looking at it. They would reject it out of hand and say, no, we don't believe that stuff. They're allowing belief to censor their objectivity and new evidence. So, by the way, peer-reviewed publication means the article is reviewed by scientists in that field, looking for critiques and errors and methodology and things like that. So it is the highest standard of publication. And so thus, young Earth creationists are often forced to work within the paradigms of the scientific establishment if they want to get published. Yeah, if you got to publish or perish, as they say, you got to get published. So you might have to just put your beliefs aside and work within their rules. Okay. Oh boy, mathematics is overrated as far as supporting deep time theories. Oh yeah, I'm a mathematician, and I'll tell you that I think they overrate mathematics. So, for example, in physics, the success of a proposed theory can be influenced by how pretty the mathematics appears to support it. Now, I credit Sabine Hossenfelder. She's a theoretical physicist, and let's see, the Germans might call her, and forgive me if I'm wrong, Frau Dr. Professor Sabine Hossenfelder. Okay, I learned by taking German that they like all those titles. Anyway, a lot of us just call her Sabine. Kind of a funny lady too. I enjoy her sense of humor, but she's a contrarian, and she is an admitted atheist. It just didn't make any sense to her that there could be a God. She's deterministic, though she doesn't believe in free will. And but I still like to listen to her because she is a contrarian in that field, and she calls out a lot of stuff going on in the physics area that needs to be challenged. And she can do that because she has a YouTube platform. She can't necessarily do that from a university professorship. So she's kind of a maverick that way. So, but yeah, it's I have a book of hers, and she does talk about. I've heard her talk about. There's too much reliance on math, and math does not prove physics. Okay, it can support physics ideas. It's very good evidence, but you got to be careful there. And I just give you a short example. Suppose we wanted to try to predict how fast can people run the mile. All right, so if we went back 20 or 30 years, the record in the mile run has been broken maybe 3 or 4 times. So if we took that evidence, got 3 or 4 points of data, and they tend to look like they're on a straight line. So if you fit a nice straight line to it, how good is that model in predicting how fast humans can run? See, that line is going to continue to go down and down and down. And eventually, if you follow it out, yeah, we can run a mile in 1 minute instead of 3 minutes and 53 seconds, which is roughly the world record right now. Or eventually we could run a mile in 0 seconds, or even negative time. The model doesn't work. In other words, a lot of mathematical models are good in the short term, but in the short term may be hiding other behavior. Actually, the curve should be gently sloped down so that it levels off. We call that an exponential decay. And so if you can get that modeled well, you might be able to predict roughly how fast humans can ever run the mile. And because it's going to level off at some point, and that's the limit of the human body. So there's an example. So in 1960, a meteorologist using laws of physics to study the weather, and a big mainframe computer tried to figure out the how to predict the weather. And he ran into a real problem, and he ran into the chaotic nature of that chaos theory. Has kind of come out of this. Now in plainer language, it basically says we cannot gather enough data, information, in order to make a prediction in the weather more than about a week or two in advance. 2 weeks is a stretch. 1 week, not too bad. But it doesn't matter how much data you gather right now. We call those initial conditions. How much initial conditions you measure right now. You're not going to be able to reliably predict the weather more than a week or two out in advance. It's just too chaotic. And so now let's think about the Big Bang. Current theory is that running backward in time, it looked like the universe would have shrunk down to virtually a point. We would have had this, the whole entire mass and energy of the universe packed into a single point, and suddenly it expands. The Big Bang. All right. And these guys are in the business. Stephen Hawking and others, they figured out, well, what would have happened in the first second of the Big Bang? What processes would have been going on there? And it's interesting. And they theorized that after 380,000 years, all this plasma would cool just enough so that atoms started to form, and electromagnetism and photons and light formed. So let there be light. 380,000 years after the Big Bang, and we observed that as astronomically as the cosmic background radiation, and so it's theorized that we can see to the edge of time. Best we can is 380,000 years after the Big Bang. All right, when you think about all this and say, wait a minute, we don't even know what was going on at that second just before. We don't know what the initial conditions were. What was going on at that split second in time, and how can you apply this theory over 13.8 billion years when you can't even predict the weather a week or two in advance? Okay. To me, it just sounds pretty suspect. Now, don't rely on it too much. So that's kind of my extreme example about mathematics is a little bit overrated when it comes to establishing scientific theories. Okay, it has its place. I'll grant you it has its place. I respect math, obviously. I did it for all my work life, most of my work life. The last one, I think this is probably the most important point I want to make, and I'll try to wrap this up. Mainstream science begins with accepting a dogma as a foundation. The universe is billions of years old. Non-life created life. The universe created itself. There's no supernatural God controlling things, and so on, and so on and on. I think that's a problem. They have rested so much on a foundation, which I call a dogma, a dogmatic foundation. Now, I would say it'd also be a scientific mistake for young earth creationists to work from a rigid foundation of biblical belief. See, the Bible is not a science book. And it's not necessary to do that either. Just examine the evidence with an open mind and compare. And so the scientific mainstream works from a dogmatic structure counter to biblical claims. It uses this foundation to explain other theories, thus building itself as a house of cards. And I say this is not necessary. It actually degrades an open search for truth, because they build all these layers of things. They've had to create something called dark matter and dark energy to explain how stuff can happen out there. How is the universe expanding like it is? Oh, there must be some energy we can't observe. How come we have spiral galaxies which should disappear after 2 million years? The spirals should disappear very quickly, on astronomical terms. Oh, there must be dark energy, dark matter. They invent stuff. They invented the Oort cloud. They invented all this stuff, and they're building a foundation on, I think it's pretty shaky, kind of a house of cards. They should not be, so it's unnecessary and actually degrades an open search for truth. They should not be in the business of censoring interpretation of evidence. But neither should young earth creationists. They shouldn't censor evidence either, interpretation of evidence. All right. So here's a way we can examine this. Okay, many aspects of, and by the way, I'm going to tie this to a parable of Jesus. How about that? Many aspects of historical science admit to two mutually exclusive resolutions. For example, is Earth billions of years old, or is it 6,000 years old? Okay, well, no one really argues for in between. Okay. Is it possible for life to spontaneously arise from inorganic chemicals or not? That's a yes or no, true or false question. Is evolution through natural selection true or not? Yeah, another true or false question. Did a catastrophic flood event happen around 4,500 years ago, or has there never been a catastrophic flood event, worldwide event? Did dinosaurs die out 66 million years ago, or during times when humans lived? I got a video on that already. Yeah, you gotta watch it. It's a fun one. There's tremendous evidence that dinosaurs were around in our not so distant past, and a lot of evidence is appearing for that. Okay, which really contradicts the scientific assumption that mainstream assumption that dinosaurs got killed off 66 million years ago. And by the way, the ones that survived had to be birds. Okay. um, so for such true-false questions, it means that one theory is true and the other is false. So those who work towards validating the false theory will continually run into problems and need to revise their theories. Okay, they're always going to have problems because they're on the false side of things. And they want to write this off. Well, this is the way science proceeds. We're always having to revise our theories. Well, I don't know. But those who work toward validating the true theory, although they may make occasional mistakes, they will tend to find that their evidence supports the true theory. And that's what you're going to find in this video series I'm doing. And like I said, I'm hardly the only one out there talking about this stuff. I always encourage you to find other sources of real experts in their field talking about how evidence is supporting the biblical account. All right, so thus we have a way to weigh scientific evidence without relying on dogmatic beliefs. Perhaps Jesus partly anticipated all this in one of his parables, and this is from Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 through 27. I know you can read. I'm going to read it out loud also. Therefore, everyone who hears, this is Jesus speaking, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had a foundation on the rocks. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. Okay, in the context of our discussion, Jesus is quoted many times, vouching for many events or for the reliability of what we call the Old Testament. If Jesus is the Son of God, why wouldn't scientific evidence tend to point towards God and the validity of the Bible? And so my point is that I think the emphasis over the past 200 some years in mainstream sciences has converged to a point where they are basing so much of their science on a foundation that is entirely theoretical and unproven, and that's their building that house on sand. It's a house of cards, okay. So remember, the heavens declare the glory of God, and He loves to leave evidence for us. So I do not think God expects us to go without evidence. And I could talk a long time about that. I'm sure a lot of professionals in the pastor field can do that too. All right, so all right. Hope this was understandable, went well for you, and I guess it's time to bow out and roll credits. And as I like to say, any mistakes, forgetfulness, other errors, those are mine. Those are on me. That's a work of progress. I'm a work in progress, like the rest of you. Okay, but for everything else that is correct, credits go to God. Okay. All right. So and look below for links to a website which has lists of all these videos and videos pertinent to this one. So anyway, let's roll credits. And thank you for joining, and hope to see you again.